Hey everyone, it's John Literal, and today I want to make a video and talk about 9/11. Since today is September 10th, 2025, I don't think I made a video about 9/11 last year, but prior to 9/11, throughout the last 5 or 6 years, I would make a video or a series of videos discussing what happened on that day. And so I kind of broke that tradition last year. Had a lot going on, had some projects going on, and so I just didn't make the time to do it, which I probably should have, but oh well. But I am going to pick back up on it and talk about 9/11 for just a little bit. I'm not going to go into major detail about all the different things that happened and why, but I do want to touch on it. But most of all, I want to inform people about who was behind it. And as you can see on the screen, I Googled September 11th, 2001. And Google brings up the source from Wikipedia, and it's quite hilarious. It says September 11th attacks, also known as 9/11, were four coordinated Islamic terrorist suicide attacks by Al-Qaeda against the United States in 2001. This is what you call part of the official narrative. And of all the things that I try to teach people about, the main thing that a person can do, if you want to learn about how the world really works and why bad things happen in the world, and why people, when they watch the news, especially if you watch the news all the time, it raises people's anxiety. People who watch the news are severely misinformed and deceived. So the thing that I always try to teach people, this is number one, when you start getting into trying to learn about the truth. Number one is never trust the official narrative. Always question the official narrative. And when you start doing that, and you start doing your own research and learning about who really runs the world and who controls the media, who controls all the governments, then you will go from questioning the official narrative to automatically realizing that the official narrative is based on, most of the time, it's based on lies. Because anything that you see on mainstream media and anything on the internet that gets a boost in the algorithms when it comes to news, that information is the information that the most evil people in the world want you to know. That's the way they want you to think. And I'm going to get into who these people are right to the very core of it. Because this cabal that controls the world, like I said, they control all governments. I'll get into that here in just a second. In fact, I've written 3 books on this cabal, and they're all published and they're available for free online. In fact, I will leave a link in the description box below to where people can read my books for free. But this cabal is what I call the Illuminati. Now, different people, different researchers will come up with their own definitions. They come up with their own titles and names for, parts of this cabal. And when I say Illuminati, I'm talking about the whole shebang. I'm talking about a network of secret societies, secret organizations, bloodline families, and it's a large network. It's like a huge web, and one strand of the web is, perhaps, like the Freemasons. Another strand is the Rosicrucians. Another strand would be intelligence agencies like the CIA, the Mossad, British intelligence, so on and so on and so on. You have another strand that would be an Illuminati organization such as the United Nations. Another strand would be the World Economic Forum. Another strand would be the Trilateral Commission. And I'm not going to go on and on and on and name all the different strands because there are a lot. This cabal, this network is huge. Far bigger, far more sophisticated than most people understand. And they were the ones, this network is the ones ultimately behind 9/11. Of course, not every strand of the web was a part of it. They were maybe, from a distance, but some of these strands were the hands-on cause of 9/11. And so, one of the bigger strands. Let me just say, do some research when it comes to 9/11, and research the dancing Israelis. Right when 9/11 happened, when the towers were going down, there was people that called in and reported some Middle Eastern-looking men with cameras that were off from a distance from the towers as they went down. They were high-fiving each other, clapping and cheering, and celebrating. Well, they were caught. And come to find out, they were Israelis. And as time went on, more information came out, and they themselves even described and said that they were there to document the event. So that would mean prior knowledge, wouldn't it? And they were pretty happy about it. So these were Israelis. And no doubt they were part of the Mossad, the intelligence agency. And there are other parts about 9/11, how the towers went down, just like controlled demolition. That is the handiwork of intelligence agencies and experts. Very sophisticated. But again, I'm not going to go into all this. In fact, in my book called The Handbook on the Powers That Should Not Be, I wrote a section on 9/11. And it's actually a section of that's in a chapter called False Flags, where I cover 4 major false flags that has happened here in America that involved America. Going all the way back to the sinking of the Lusitania, which was the trigger to get America involved in World War I. Then you had Pearl Harbor, which was a false flag. That was the trigger to get Americans involved in World War II. Then the Gulf of Tonkin was the trigger to get America into war at Vietnam. And 9/11 was the trigger to get America involved in a series of regime change wars that's still going on. From 2001 to 2025. Well, specifically, war was declared, I think it was in 2020 or 2002. But anyway, this whole time we've been still involved in a series of regime change wars. And again, like I said, 9/11 was that trigger. Now, it's not the there's false flags that go on every day. And what a false flag is, that is when, most commonly, a government will attack its own people or attack another group of people and blame it on somebody else so they can get the result of whatever they desire. A lot of times it involves, a trigger to get a country into war, or to get two certain people fighting with each other. But in the case of the false flags that I just mentioned, of the Gulf of Tonkin, the Gulf of, or the Pearl Harbor, the sinking of the Lusitania in 9/11, that was directly to get America involved in war that otherwise the American people would not have accepted. And that's why they do false flags. They do false flags here for America to get the American people to get behind sending their young men and women to go and fight and kill and be killed. Now, if it wasn't for the sinking of the Lusitania, the American people would not have accepted going into World War I. If it wasn't for Pearl Harbor, and I write about Pearl Harbor and how that was actually a false flag, that was to get people, because the American people did not want to get involved in World War II. FDR even promised that he was not going. That's how he got so much support from the American people, was he promised that he would not get America involved in World War II. Well, guess what happened? Yeah, Pearl Harbor happened, and guess what the people did? They got behind and supported the war and shed blood for it, unfortunately. Same way with Vietnam. And the people would not have gotten behind this series of regime change wars had it not been for 9/11. The day after 9/11, all the military recruitment stations were being flooded by young, brave men and women who wanted to go and fight for their country. Sadly, that's, is all based upon lies. Just like all wars are, they're all based upon lies. But it takes propaganda, the control of the media, in order to impact the perception of the population. You control people's perception, you control their behavior. And if you make them think that some evil boogeyman from another part of the world has attacked their country, then you can get that support. And that's what it's all about. Now, here's the main thing. This is all about for one world government. That's the agenda of this cabal, this what I call the Illuminati, is one world government. That's the main goal. That's been their goal from the beginning of time, actually, because this cult, this Illuminati, they've been under different names and, going all the way back to the ancient civilizations. There's different manifestations of them throughout the course of history. But the ultimate goal is for a one world government, for there to be no sovereign countries, to have one world dictator, which we as Christians call the Antichrist. In fact, my book called The Illuminati Playbook, I demonstrate how a leaked Illuminati document shows that this cabal has somebody prepared to be the one world dictator. And there's a few different names. The despot sovereign is one of the names given in the Illuminati document. I got to be careful on some of the things I say. If I say the name of the document, I might get flagged here on YouTube. In fact, I'll probably get flagged anyway, and so be it. But I hope this reaches people. I know the algorithms are set against me on my videos and on any big tech platform. But anyway, that's the whole agenda of this cabal. Now, who is at the very center of this web of all these different strands, this whole network? Who is actually at the very center of it with the ultimate control of it? Well, we don't battle against flesh and blood. It's the powers and principalities. It's a spiritual battle. This is not only a battle that is happening here in the flesh, but it comes from the pits of hell. It comes, in Christian terms, we would refer this as to Satan, ultimately, who is the top of the hierarchy amongst the fallen angels and demons in the dark spiritual realms. And there's other names that occultists calling. There's other names that just different groups of people calling from different religions. But as a Christian, it's Satan, the devil, the dragon, the serpent. The Book of Enoch refers to him as Gadriel, which I think is probably one of the better names to refer to him as. And but Lucifer's another one. That's what the Freemasons call him, and some other parts of the occult. And people get all wound up about words and titles, and especially Lucifer, because there is a little confusion as far as Bible translation and stuff. But he's got many names. And he was kicked out of heaven by God, and he took a third of the archangels with him. And we refer to them as the fallen angels. So you have them. You also have the disembodied spirits called demons. And so that is the spiritual aspect of this. That's who's ultimately behind it. They are behind the New World Order for a one world government. Well, Satan and the archangels, the fallen angels, they know that they've lost the war. The ultimate war, they know that they've lost through Christ. But they've managed to convince their followers, many of their followers of this satanic death cult that I call the Illuminati, they've convinced them that they can actually win it. In fact, I've heard different occultists say that evil can ultimately win between the battle of good and evil. Well, the fallen angels and Satan has convinced them of that, but they've lost. But that doesn't mean, since they've lost the war, it doesn't mean that they don't win some battles along the way. Because what their main goal is to rebel against God and to destroy all that is good of His creation. They want to take down as many people from God's creation as they can. They want to destroy all the good that comes from His creation, take away all the potential of great things that could happen in this world. This world could be so much better. But they are behind death and destruction and misery. And so they're going to fight right to the very end. And that's what they're doing. And one of the ways of winning some of these battles is the one world government, where Satan and the fallen angels and the demons will have ultimate power, the maximum amount of power that they can have, and control the people. And I'm not going to get into all the details and stuff. In fact, I'm probably explaining more stuff than I really intended on. I just wanted to make this a kind of a concise thing. But I want people to know exactly where all this is coming from. All the bad in the world that happens. It's not from God. It's from those who rebel against Him. That is why bad things happen to good people in this world. But they're going to pay a price. There will be a just punishment for the crimes that they've committed. In the same way with everyone. So ultimately, 9/11 was all the works of Satan, the angels, who work through their minions, that is, the satanic death cult that I refer to as the Illuminati. Now keep in mind, like I said, there's different researchers that have different categories. They have different names. I don't want people to mistake what I call this cabal, the Illuminati. Not mistake that with the secret society called the Illuminati. This secret society was established in 1776, and they commissioned Adam Weishaupt, the Rothschilds, Jacob Frank, to put together a secret society to create a new world order, that is, for a one world government, to destroy all monarchies and for a one world government with a one world religion of the religion of dark Luciferianism. And so 9/11 was part of it helped fast forward this agenda, because with 9/11, like I said, it allowed for a blank check and to go out and attack all the countries, to go after all the governments that were not in line with this one world government, new world order. And you will find that these governments that were attacked, part of it was due because they were not part of the Illuminati central bank monetary system. And the Illuminati cannot they can't stand that, because that's all part of the things that they've done over the centuries, is to get people depending on their monetary system. And one example, like here in the United States, the Federal Reserve, which is not federal, it's not a reserve, it's just a form of slavery to get as many people into debt as possible, to get the government in debt to these central banks. And so the one who is in debt, as the Bible says, are a slave to those that they're in debt to. Satan and his demons know that, and that's why they, throughout the years, starting with the Knights Templars, they created a banking system, a central banking system, with the form of usury, charging interest on loans, and it's all about slavery. If you've ever been in severe debt, or if you're in debt to your eyeballs now, you probably have a basic understanding of what it means to be a debt slave. Even just something as simple as credit cards. People can get in big time debt just with credit cards alone, and you'll learn real quick on what it's like to be a debt slave. But anyway, that's been their scheme this whole time. So for 9/11, these regime change wars was to go after these countries who were not in line with the Illuminati banking cartels. And especially anybody that's ever, in modern history, anybody that's ever tried to create for their government their own independent monetary system and their own currency, well, they get attacked by the Illuminati through these governments. And unfortunately, the United States played a big part in going after. They've been the attack dogs to go after these countries. They'll make some kind of excuse to act like that country and that government's the bad guys, and so they can go in there and get control of their government and have a regime change, so that they can put a central bank in there. That's what it's all about. But with 9/11, that was part of it. 9/11 was huge. 9/11 has massive amounts of layers, different layers within it, for all the reasons why and how, for the whole purpose of 9/11. One thing it did was it got war profiteers. It gave them work. All these different people out there that all these different corporations and stuff that have factories and they mass produce things for weapons and different things for the military. They made lots of money. They make lots of money, bunches. Now they're just all part of it. They're the ones that make the parts and stuff aren't really in the know most of the time, that they're just being used. But another reason why 9/11 happened is because look at all the wars and all the death and destruction that happened. When you learn about the Illuminati and the inner core, a lot of them are cannibals. They drink human blood and they do human sacrifices. Human sacrifices give these sick, demonic people power, because when they do human sacrifices, this gives energy to the demonic realm. That's why they do the human sacrifices. If you don't know that human sacrifices are still a thing and it still goes on, then you better do your research. Because the Illuminati, the Satanic Death Cult, they do human sacrifices, and that's the main reason, is because it fuels the demonic realm. Demons feed off that. They feed off misery and death and sadness. All the low vibrations that come from humanity when people are under distress, when they're in fear, when they're angry, when they're petrified a lot of times during human sacrifices. That's catnip to the demons. And so that's why wars happen. That's one of the reasons why war happens. That's why it happens for spiritual reasons. Is the death, the destruction, the fear, all that stuff feeds the demons. And war is always a form of human sacrifice. It's basically part of their religious ceremony. It takes that ceremony to even a higher level. And that's why the Illuminati is always behind it. The Illuminati, through their central banks, fund all the wars. They fund wars from all sides. So when the United States is at war with another country, the Illuminati gives loans to us, I don't want to say us, because there's a big difference between our country versus our government. Well, they give, our government takes these huge loans out from the central banks, and what other country that they're fighting is also taking loans out to the Illuminati central banks. So basically the Illuminati banks have full control of the wars. And so they're behind it. So they not only get the blood sacrifices from all the people that die, and also feed from the fear and all the stuff that happens, but it gives them control over the countries that take out those loans and get into debt. Like I said, those who are in debt are slaves to those that they are in debt to. And that same goes with governments. And that started happening a long time ago, where, especially the Rothschilds, they figured that out, that they give these big loans to kings and different people, especially those who were in charge over a country. Well, they get that leader in debt. Well, guess who's writing the speeches for that leader, for that king? Yeah, it's the bankers writing their speeches for them, telling them what to do, giving them the script to follow. And that's what happens today. They've got more control now. So they've already, anybody that gets into the high level of politics in any country, they're already part of one of the Illuminati secret societies. Every one of them. Here in America, that's why a lot of the presidents were Freemasons. And, just like the Bushes. Daddy Bush, was part of the Illuminati through Skull and Bones. And Boy George Bush was Skull and Bones. Back when you had Bush and Kerry, under the illusion of running for president, they already knew who they were going to use, and they already had the script and knew what they were going to do. But John Kerry is an Illuminati member through Skull and Bones too. So we had two Skull and Bones members at the top of, running for president. And that's just how it is. And I don't care what president that we're talking about, they're all part of it. They're all part of of at least a secret society or an organization. And just like here in America, we have different Illuminati organizations like the Council on Foreign Relations. Council on Foreign Relations is the Illuminati in America. And it was just one of the ways that they are creating this New World Order. Trilateral Commission, which Trilateral Commission is an organization that not only involved in America, but also throughout the world. What are they pushing? The New World Order, one world government. And so on and so on and so on. So, I think I've listed two things so far why 9/11 happened. Blood sacrifices. All the people that died, that's a lot of deaths, that's a lot of misery, that's a lot of fear. And like 9/11 happened, it caused a lot of anger. Americans were infuriated by what they saw happen right before their eyes. But it was blamed on somebody else. And when you think about the official narrative and how ridiculous that was, that 9/11 happened because some old Arab in a cave in Afghanistan masterminded the whole thing, and terrorists with box cutters hijacked planes and ran them into the buildings. That's insane. I mean, if you're talking about theories and conspiracy theories, that's probably the weakest conspiracy theory of them all. It makes no sense. Because that's not how it happened. So, blood sacrifices. Then, another thing, here's a third one. And what 9/11 led to was the passing of legislation that gave government far more control than they ever had, at least legally controlled. They've always controlled, anytime they've ever done things that were against the Constitution, and that's a whole other thing in itself, but for the sake of this explanation, they always broke the Constitution. They never followed the Constitution. They would pretend they did, but they would always use things like emergencies and stuff, false flags, to bypass due process. Well, after 9/11, they already had these bills written up long ago, at least a decade ago, just like the Patriot Act. That was all written up way before 9/11 ever happened. The Homeland Security Act is another one. They had already had it planned. Those two forms of legislation were not in reaction to 9/11. 9/11 happened because they wanted that legislation to get passed and get the American people to go along with it. Well, the Patriot Act gave, and it still does, gives the government the unbridled ability to legally spy on anybody they want, citizens, and all they have to do is just say, oh, they're just, they're suspicious, they could be a domestic terrorist. So they spy on us with no limitations whatsoever. They always did that. They always spied on us. But now it's legal. They didn't have to cut through any red tape or anything. And thanks to the Patriot Act, that's what happened. Well, the Homeland Security Act is even scarier, because this was legislation that was passed that allows government to declare an emergency. Whatever lie they want to come up with, they can declare an emergency And they can go as far as putting people into concentration camps. And they could put large amounts of people, for an example, like in a stadium, hold them there, inject them with anything they want to inject them with, and if those people try to get away, they have the legal right, well, it's not a right, but legally, through the courts, they can shoot them and kill them for trying to get away. And so then add on the fact you got FEMA. Anytime there's a false flag, and we've been seeing this happen here lately, is FEMA goes in and confiscates people's land. They confiscate the private property. That's what, thanks to the Homeland Security Act, that's what they're legally able to do. Go in and take private property away. And that's all part of the agenda for a New World Order, is to abolish all private property. And they've been making huge gains on that. And so, really, people don't really own property, because if you pay property tax, well, guess what? You're basically renting it off the government anyway. But at least, if you do, like, quote unquote, own the property, you do have a little more say-so than somebody that rents off somebody else that owns the property. But all that is coming to an end, and it's happening very quickly. 9/11 definitely played a big part on taking away private property because of the Homeland Security Act. And then the huge false flag of 2020. And I don't know if this video is going to survive YouTube or not. It may get shot down before it even gets uploaded. But I have gone into that, and I got to be careful with what I say, just in case. There was a huge false flag that happened in 2020. It actually makes 9/11 look like a walk in a park, because a lot of the stuff that they accomplished here in the United States and taking the rights away from American people, well, they did it on a global scale, and that was the biggest transfer of wealth in human history. And it destroyed private property. A lot of people lost their businesses because of it. Well, the Homeland Security Act has played a big part in what happened during 2020, because they automatically had all that legislation in place to do whatever they wanted. And so, anyway, just trying to give you some big reasons why 9/11 happened. And so, to kind of go back on who this cult is and how they're structured, like I said, it's first of all, it's spiritual. The demons, Satan and the demons and the fallen angels, they're the ones ultimately in the spiritual realms that's behind all this. This Illuminati, when you get deep down into the inner core of this cabal with the bloodline families, I'm talking about bloodline families that you've probably never even heard of. And those are the more powerful ones. They're even more powerful than the ones that we all know about, like the Rothschilds and stuff. And they all, if you want to get into the Bible and use the Bible to identify this and to explain it, just take a look at Genesis chapter 6, where you have when the fallen archangels mated with human women, and they created a hybrid that they called Nephilim. In fact, I've been listening to somebody that's an expert on this, Gary Wayne. In fact, my wife ordered me his book, the Genesis 6 Conspiracy, Part 2. Can't wait to get it in, but I've been listening to his videos here. And, keep in mind, I've written and published 3 books on the Illuminati, and I've made over 1,000 videos talking about it. And from what I've heard from Gary Wayne, I'm really impressed, because he's actually helped me. I mean, stuff that I knew, but he's kind of helped me with a little more detail. And so I definitely recommend people to check out Gary Wayne, the Genesis 6 Conspiracy, because he lays it out I mean, I understood a lot of this stuff based upon what the occult believes and my study on secret societies and so on. But he actually does a really good job to put it in perspective for Christians. And it goes back to the satanic cult, the Illuminati, goes back to the period of time before the flood, Genesis 6. And you had the hybrids who were the offspring of the fallen angels and the women. And they referred to as giants. There were different tribes of them. And they not only reigned during the time of before the flood, but they also made a comeback after the flood. And so these bloodlines of these bloodline families trace their lineage back to these different fallen angels, which is, it sounds crazy, but it makes a lot of sense, because whether you believe that or not, whether you actually believe that these bloodline families are bloodlines of fallen angels, if you believe that or not, that's up to you. But these people do believe it. And when you do a little research and you realize how serious they are about their bloodlines and marrying into the right bloodlines, then it all makes sense. And so, that's why they're so careful with it. Why they're so serious about it is because they want to keep that Nephilim blood in their genetics. And so, when you look at all, throughout the centuries, the millenniums, and you look at these different bloodlines and through the kingships and stuff, they were all serious about the bloodlines, and they were all very careful about who they married and so on. It's because they believe that. And to be honest with you, I believe it myself. I don't believe the way they believe, but yeah, I believe that these bloodlines, maybe not all bloodlines, there's subcategories of these bloodlines as well, but they intermarry in order to keep that Nephilim, that fallen angel genetics in their family line, in their family lineage. Because obviously, if you're an offspring of an archangel, you're going to have some advantages over those who don't have that. And so anyway, that's to kind of give you an idea on what we have. Now, everybody who's in the Illuminati or these secret societies doesn't mean that they're part of the bloodline. Some of them are. In fact, one of the ways that you could tell that they've got that blood in them is those people that are born into it. When they weren't invited to join the secret society, but they were born into it. That's when you know that they've got some of the bloodline in them. And, that's why some of them, like those who are not actually part of the bloodline, there's a limitation on how far they can go up the hierarchy. And they'll eventually max out on the degree of whatever secret society or how far they can move up. And, that's why, you got a young person that's already a 33rd degree Mason, and they've moved on, and especially if they've gotten into the secret society of the Rosicrucians, they got something going on in their genetics. Yeah. But and that's how they're able to be so deceptive, is because they have some advantages over some of us normal people. But they're not as smart as what they think they are, and those who are not a part of that bloodline, it just takes waking up to what's going on. And God is actually on our side. You seek God. You seek, if you love the Lord with all your heart, all your mind, all your soul, then you're going in the right direction, and you can tap into power that is far more powerful than what these bloodlines are. Because you don't need a certain kind of genetics and a certain kind of blood. You need the Spirit of God. And the Spirit of God is far more powerful than genetics. The problem is this cabal has done a really good job at keeping people in ignorance. That's why they're called the occult. That's what the word occult means, it means hidden. That's why they call these secret societies, they call it secret societies. It's because they can't come out and tell you who they really are and what their agendas really are. They hide under the cowardly form of secrecy. That's why even in their rituals, everything about their religions everything's symbolic. They got symbols for everything. Because they can't come out and tell you who their God really is and what their agendas are. And, that's why you got all these different traditions within the cult. You got symbols for symbols. You got things that are symbolic for other things that are symbolic. And it's just, just a form of hiding who they really are. And unless you're really at the very inner core of this cult, then you're going to be still kind of not in the know, because you're still operating in a form of symbolic, all the symbolism and stuff. And so anyway, I'm kind of getting away from this, but that's who's behind all these false flags. All these false flags, major false flags that happen in the world, comes from this. And it's for this one main agenda, one world government. And to bring down as many people in rebellion against God. They've lost to God, but they are in rebellion against Him. They just want to continue to rebel against Him and go against God's will. And what more evil way than you can go about it than to attack God's people, His creation, and bring down as many as you can, deceive as many as they can, to weaken them. All these people that could be doing the will of God and making a difference in the world, this cult does everything they can to weaken that. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and end the video here. I will leave a link in the description box below, or maybe more than one link. Leave links to my books, that way you can read them. I've got my first book that I wrote on the Illuminati back in 2020. It's called The Handbook on the Powers That Should Not Be. And in the chapter of false flags, I write a fairly large section about 9/11, what happened, and everything. Then, a couple years later, I wrote a book called The Antichrist and His Cult, where I went from just talking about this cult and who they are and how they operate. I go into more of the spiritual aspect of it. And then, my third book, my last one that I wrote on the Illuminati, is called The Illuminati Playbook. And I'm not going to read off the rest of the title because I'm afraid that might trigger the algorithms and get me flagged. But I will leave a link in the description box below. And that book, I actually provide a fresh translation of this Illuminati document. And I've wrote essays on this document. And it's a really large book. And it's actually getting a lot of attention. I've got it for free on archive.org, and it has skyrocketed here lately. And it's got a ton of views, especially here lately. And it's pushing over 1,000 downloads. And so I'm not selling any of them. I sold very few of those books because I had to do it on Lulu.com because Amazon banned it. That's how much it exposes what's really going on. And but the free downloads is done really, really well. And I provide all my books for free because I'm not in this for the money. You know, I not only have written books on the Illuminati, but I've written a bunch. Written and published a lot of books, Christian books. Most of them are English translations of Bible commentaries from the ancient Christians of the early church. And I just actually finished up a translation, and I'm in the editing process now, but I've finished up a translation of a Bible commentary on the book of Hebrews by a Greek church father by the name of Ecumenius. And so that will be out on the market here really soon. I'm just doing the final touches on it. But anyway, I'll let you go. I appreciate you all. Take care. Have a good day.